This film clip accompanies the Biogeography Virtual Field Trips series. Today, we're going to Maddens Plains. The Illawarra and Woronora Plateau both are dominated by the Hawkesbury Sandstone. Here we find some open forest or woodland that transitions to treeless areas, heathlands, where the landscape shows zonation of vegetation along a soil moisture gradient. Where soils are wetter, or where there are depressions, and the water table is close to the surface due to bedrock constraints, we find pockets of heath. This site is in relatively close proximity to UOW, just over 20 kilometers away. Heathland generally falls into restricted areas, so due to distinct limitations with access, the site used sits within a verge between the roadside and an aero club field. It remains typical of heathland vegetation, and as we'll see, the site contains a surprising amount of diversity. At first look across the site, it shows a relatively even canopy of shrubs. According to SPECT, this would be a closed heathland site due to overlapping canopy. The site is treeless, but does have some shrubs that grow up to 2 meters tall. Those trees way in the background on this slide are occurring on the roadside verge on the opposite side of the road. Generally, heathland areas are composed by genera such as Banksia, Hakea, Melaleuca, and other types of flowering plants. The site itself is located south of Darks Forest on the Princess Highway at the Aero Club site. There are some hazards, old rusty drainage pipes nested within, some man-made drainage channels that are hidden by the vegetation, so it's not advised to visit on your own. As you can see from this site entrance, it's been visited by students for many years. It's produced pathways throughout. Going on to our site overview, again, we have a think about the topography. Is there a slope? What about the drainage? How many layers of vegetation can you see? How tall is the main growth form? This happens to be a shrub. Its general name is Hakea. It's around 1 meter tall, as you see on the left-hand side. And we will be looking further at some of the other layers that can be seen. How many layers of vegetation with the ground cover? There is considerable amount when we look actually within the shrub layer itself. Are there herbs? How much ground cover is there? Further to the site, is it shaded? Is it exposed? What kinds of soil substrate do we see? And what signs of disturbance can be found? What's underfoot? When we remove the litter and brush it aside, we can find some gray mineral sandy loams. When we look a little closer, we find they are basically generally acidic. And further, these form a shallow organic horizon that across quite similar areas are curaçoles, soils which have a sharp boundary between coarse textured sands or loams in the A horizon with finer textured clays in the B horizon. Back to our vegetation structure. We have an obvious shrub layer that's dominant at this site, as previously mentioned. So the dominant species is referred to as bushy needlewood. Hakea refers to a genus name that contains a variety of species. The species here is quite prickly, requires protective cover on one's legs. It's often referred to in a number of different ways, including some reference to porcupines. There's a fruit, a dense woody follicle that's rough and knobbly. This sits within very sharp, needle-like pointy leaves. While perhaps not dominant here at this site, there are other small to large shrubs. They're often associated with heathland, and Banksia is one of those. The swamp Banksia is a low shrub up to 1 meter high with elliptical shaped leaves, and it's often found in wet heathland. Few other species, also shrubs. Isopogon, some call drumsticks. It's that's related to grevilleas and banksias. It's about 1 to 1.5 meters tall, and while many species have a wide distributional range, there is one that's mainly restricted to heathland shrubs. And its cones give it its name that refers to drumsticks. There's also the heath myrtle, swamp beronia. Other species within the shrubs themselves are the perhaps more hidden that need to be looked for at the ground level. We have the slender twine rush, the zigzag bog rush, scale rush, and others. This is only a sample. The ground cover has a surprising mix. What about signs of disturbance? Along the edges, there are quite a few weeds. Here at this site, which is also located on a road verge, well, unfortunately with the turnout to the Era Club site, which is also a disturbance, it has been a dumping site. Also, there's that old network of metal drainage pipes mentioned before, pretty much hidden. Thinking outside of the site itself, climate change, drought cycles, land use changes, and in some areas mining, all have an effect. There are some signs of animal life, birds, reptiles, wallabies. Just outside the specific site, along the edges of the Era Club site itself, we can find sundews. These are flypaper plants that trap prey and sticky hairs on their leaves. They make up one of the largest groups of carnivorous plants, and they are found in or around boggy areas.